September 27th, 2022. So at this time, would the city clerk please take roll?
Councilmember Okamura.
Here.
Councilmember Stanish is absent. Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Vice Mayor Dolk.
Here.
Mayor Cott.
Here. Y'all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Okay, so this is a special meeting, and the purpose of this meeting is to have a town hall regarding the this whole idea with the Delta tunnels. And but before we actually get into that presentation, let me just go through a couple housekeeping items. First of all, ask city council members if you have anything to disclose, any ex parte communications relating to the item on the agenda.
No.
Okay, they don't. So the way this is going to work is we'll have a presentation. And then we'll have some comments by our county supervisor, and then I'll open up for public comment. Now, public comment for this event is not a venting. If you have clarification issues or questions like that, this is the place to ask them. If you want to vent, we'll tell you how to do that. Okay, but we don't want that here tonight. All right, so at this point, I'm going to introduce our presenter. It's Misty Kaltrider and Osha Kakari. I don't know if I said that right, but okay. Okay. They're with Solano County, and Misty has presented the Delta Conveyance Project report, basically a review of the EIR and to a couple of committees. I know she's done it for the county, city, and coordinating committee, and it was very good, informative. So I asked her to do that here as well. So there's a handout for you to look at. Okay, it's up there. There's some up here if you want it as well. So make sure you take that. And with that, Misty, go ahead.
Okay, now can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor and council members. Misty Kaltrider from Solano County. I'm here joined with Osha Meserve, and she's the outside counsel for the Delta Counties Coalition, and also is helping us with the county, the various 5 Delta counties, with looking at this draft EIR that is produced by the State Water Board. So, thank you, Department of Water Resources. So I'd like to, let's see if I can get this. Have a slide, please. Slide presentation. Thank you. So tonight I'd like to give a presentation on just an overview of the proposed Delta Conveyance Project that is proposed by the Department of Water Resources, or the State Water, the DWR, I'll just say. And I'm going to give an overview on the comparison of the various project iterations, and also information about the draft EIR, and then how you, as the audience here that could be impacted by this project, can provide comments to the state. Figure out how to use this. Here we go. So California climate is where most precipitation occurs in the to Central Valley Farms, in urban centers in the San Francisco Bay Area. However, these larger federal and state water projects developed around 19th century laws using 20th century infrastructure are encountering critical challenges associated with environmental constraints, climate changes, and overextension of demands on the infrastructure, which are making these systems less reliable and less cost-effective for future investments. So what is this Delta project? Well, essentially, it's the latest version of a massive state's water project, an isolated conveyance. And so why is this important? Well, this project takes water that freshens the delta and maintains the water quality in a healthy ecosystem and diverts that fresh water under the delta through a tunnel. And this directly to the export pumps in the southern portion of the delta near Tracy. This water is then exported to users in the central and southern California to the detriment of the delta. Now, this concept is not new and has been under different programs and projects for decades. A list of this is presented here. But the most current version, the Delta Conveyance Project, is proposed construction and operation of a single underground tunnel that would divert millions of acre-feet of fresh water that would otherwise flow naturally through the Bay Delta. Now, according to the project proponents, the goal of this project is to provide operational flexibility for water deliveries for its customers south of the Delta. These massive changes ignore the impacts on the Delta itself. This diversion reduces freshwater outflows needed to maintain the salinity from further migration upstream. This directly impacts the intakes by Ag and Solano County users that rely on the North Bay Aqueduct in Solano County. And this would result in less water available for these users and higher costs to treat that Delta water. So this slide shows a comparison of the various different projects as the state's projects over time. So we have the Peripheral Canal, which was opposed by voters in the early 80s. Then you have the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. Then it's revised into the California Water Fix. Now this latest is the Delta Conveyance. All similar, isolated conveyances that take fresh water from the northern portion of the Delta and diverts it directly to the pumping plants in the southern Delta, bypassing the heart of the Delta itself. So some of the key elements of this project, well, it's 2 intakes in the northern portion near Hood and Cortland, each approximately about a quarter mile long. The intakes include fresh fish screens and designated or designed to minimize fish impacts and diverts water into a single 39-foot diameter tunnel drilled 150 feet below the surface of the Delta, extending over 45 miles from the northern portion of the Delta to the southern pumping facilities. Even with the proposed northern intakes, the southern intake facilities with their massive pumps will continue to operate as a dual system, as DWR has no plans to modernize an aging Clifton Court facilities or the southern pumping facilities. As such, this proposed system doesn't effectively mitigate for fish loss in the southern Delta. This project is going to have multiple construction facilities along each alignment, including concrete batch plants, fuel stations, power stations, staging areas for stockpiles and other facilities that each take over hundreds of acres of prime farmland out of service. So the tunnel is 2 potential alignments kind of shown here, with the eastern Bethany alignment as the DWR's preferred alternative, and that's shown kind of in that side. You can see the blue and then the green southern portion. So there's going to be many levee roads that will be impacted. The eastbound, especially the eastbound road towards Stockton and I-5, since that is the primary designated construction route for all this work that's going to be happening out here. But then, of course, with all these areas in the Delta is going to be happening, we're going to have detours that's going to primarily go through Highway 12 through Solano County to avoid that construction traffic. So this project directly impacts the Delta without any benefits to local water supplies, and the project cost over $16 billion and will take 13 years to construct with disruptions across 6 counties. So how is the state going to construct this tunnel? Well, essentially, they're going to use what they call tunnel boring machines. So this slide shows the scale of such a machine, where you see a person sitting next to this large diameter cutting head. And essentially, for scale, its diameter is a 39-foot cutting head is essentially the same length as a school bus. So imagine this drilling 150 feet deep under the Delta for 13 years. Now, there could be up to 6 of these machines operating at any one time at the same time, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for 13 years. So now what could be, think about what could the impacts could. Well, there could be potential vibrations, and that on existing, as these things worm their way underneath the Delta, you could have vibrations and potential impacts on our existing levees in older communities, impacting natural gas lines and abandoned wells in the area that are prevalent in the Delta area. So this slide, when you hear about California's water system as an engineering marvel, this is what they mean. Now, this is a busy slide, but really what I want you to focus in on is the Delta drains a watershed that totals 40% of the California's water. Federal, state, and local reservoirs store some of that water for flood protection, water supply, and environmental uses. In wet years, what is called unimpaired flows from the Delta to the bay could exceed about 50 million acre feet. In dry years, it could be less than 10 million acre feet. Now, an acre foot provides enough water for 2 homes for a year. Pumps that operate 5,000 cubic feet a second for 1 year can move about 3.5 or a little over 3.5 million acre feet in a year. So enough fresh water must flow through the Delta throughout dry months in order to repel salt water that pushes inland from the ocean in the San Francisco Bay. And then the reservoirs are used in part to help the salinity from reaching the Delta. During drought conditions like we're encountering now, there's not enough water upstream in the reservoirs to push that salt water back. And so it can contaminate channels that supply water to the Central Valley Water Project and the State Water Project. And so the proposed project reduces outflow that keeps the salt water from migrating up the Delta. With sea level rise, more outflow is necessary in order to keep saltwater at bay. So the draft EIR doesn't address the impacts of reduced outflows due to increased Delta exports and their impacts on Sassoon Marsh and the San Francisco Bay and our water users in our Delta. So the Delta provides a common resource, including freshwater supply for cities and ag communities in and around Solano County. The actions the state is proposing is an impact to the health of the Delta and the quality and the quantity of water available to those that rely on the Delta. The state has an obligation to restore, maintain, and protect the Delta, including water supplies, water quality, levees, and the estuary. Delta exports disproportionately impact the environment, fish, wildlife, and the users of the Delta because water reduces freshwater flows and impacts how the estuary works, therefore causing more detriments such as harmful algae blooms and others. The tunnel attempts to solve water quality supply problems for the Southern California and parts of the Central Valley and the Bay Area, but does nothing to solve the water supply problems for those that are in Delta users, such as the NBA. And it makes them worse. And it provides no incentive to help to protect to improve water quality in the Delta. So here I'd like to turn it over to OSHA Reserve to provide more information about the impactful nature of this project.
kind of the opposite of a sales job. Um, Anyway, and we will have time for questions too. But so, yeah, we'll go over some of the impacts that, we've been beginning to study. The environmental impact report came out a couple months ago. I did bring with me, this is 1/4 of the EIR. The other 3 binders are in the back of my car. It's pretty daunting to try to get through what the project is. So that's part of the reason we wanted to come and provide more of a summary and an overview, just so that people who are most impacted by the project living here in the Delta can get a sense of what the project is and begin to form their own opinions about what to do about it, and hopefully, help join with the county and the other Solano County and the other Delta counties and all the cities and water districts and other entities that are saying, hey, this is not the best thing for the Delta. So, some of the specifics that we're looking at on this slide is, and that's just like a zoom into the routes, which again, on that slide up there, you're seeing the red one is the preferred route. And then the central one is the route that we saw with the California water fix, which goes straight through the center of the Delta. I think what happened is, as when the DWR and the Delta Conveyance and Design and Construction Authority went back to look at the details of the tunnel, we were hoping they would go back and find that there's other options for shoring up water supplies that wouldn't include a new diversion on the Sacramento River at all. Instead, they looked at just moving the tunnel over to the east a bit because of constructability, doing that kind of construction through going across the islands. There were a lot of logistical issues, and also with the getting materials around, there were a lot of barges in the waterways that were planned. And so, one of the challenges that we have in responding to this EIR though, is that there are alternatives, right? So you've got your proposed project, that red line, and then you've got the orange line, which is an alternative, which arguably would be even worse in terms of disrupting Delta agriculture and communities, although the red line is not great either. So it's not like, I guess that's one overarching thing that, I want to make sure gets across today, is that the way that the state is talking about this project and the way that the governor and his people have been trying to put pressure on our elected leaders and other folks is that, okay, now we've brought forth the compromise that is better for the Delta, and you guys should be okay with it now. And that's why in the handout, we've taken the time to do the comparison between the different versions of what we saw in the 2015 time period and what we're seeing now. And we're saying, look, you don't get to compare it against the same bad project just because you may have, say, 5 fewer launch shafts and slightly less disturbance on the ground. That doesn't make it a good project. And so I think that's just something to keep in mind, is that from an environmental standpoint, the baseline is our current conditions. That's what DWR needs to compare this project to. And what they're doing in the public relations land is trying to get you to imagine an even worse twin tunnel that is slightly larger, that, now they want to get the credit for doing something that's not quite so bad. In terms of the air quality, we do have an air quality expert who's looking at some of the flaws in the analysis and be working on technical comments around that. But one of the things that's crazy about it is there's I think 4 or 5 air basins that this project would go across. So that's another thing is, I've worked as an attorney doing CEQA and environmental review for, over 20 years. And we might get an EIR about a mall project or about a trail or about, or even an NBA arena, something really large, right? This is like the scale of it is kind of hard to even fathom, but the idea that it would go across 6 counties, 5 air basins, and that, somehow you could, analyze and mitigate the kind of scale of impacts they're talking about, I think even the 4 binders doesn't even do it justice. So I think that's the other thing, is that it's just kind of like a different kind of animal. It's not like any of the other kind of projects that, we may see in our daily life being developed in our towns or cities or, in our county. So, and with respect to noise, you know, a lot of that's going to be more localized. So for Solano County, I think a lot of the impacts are what we would call indirect, but that doesn't mean they're not real. And especially when you're looking at the long term, and whether it's during this very long construction period, or in the actual implementation, if it was ever built, you know, it would really, like that arrow was showing you at the beginning, you know, your water quality here in Rio Vista really depends on how much fresh water is coming down the Sacramento River. And right now, all that water is coming out kind of this way. Sure, they can open the Delta Cross channel to get water down toward the South Delta pumps. And obviously, like the Delta Cross channel is open today. And that's taking some fresh water that might otherwise shoot out this way and help freshen your system. But if they would take out 6,000 CFS, cubic feet per second, which is 6,000 base basketballs, right? Every second. So it's just so much water. It's like half the average flow of the Sacramento River. Now, Sacramento River, as you know, has wild fluctuations, but it's just a very huge amount of capacity. It almost doubles the diversion, the physical diversion capacity that DWR has, that the state project has. They've got around 10,000 CFS that theoretically could be diverted in the South Delta. So if they could get 6,000 CFS, or this project also as an alternative includes a third potential intake, one at Clarksburg. So there's one at Hood, one at Cortland, and then one that could be added if the federal CVP, Central Valley Project, would participate. So all these things are kind of on the agenda. We don't know exactly what project could be approved. With respect to noise, you know, a lot of that's going to would be localized around the intake locations, and then wherever the shafts are, where this tunnel boring machine has to be worked on and put into the tunnel. With respect to the roads and traffic, I know Supervisor Mashburn's been talking about it, and it's something that we're going to try to find a way with Public Works to analyze. But you know, already you've got a lot of cut through traffic happening through your county on these roads and bridges, which are already impacted. You know, people trying to get from Sacramento to the Bay Area or Stockton. And the EIR doesn't even really try to analyze the volume of those impacts. And they say, well, you know, we're not going to be sending our trucks that are, you know, working, like the contract with the construction company won't specify going through this area, but we know that the employees or other entities that they don't control absolutely would be, you know, some of them may live out in this area. I mean, I guess that's the other thing though, in terms of local jobs. And we're asking, Jeff Michael is the economist out of the Pacific, call it University of the Pacific, is we're looking at this for us, but you know, we don't really think it's going to create local jobs either, because it's so specialized. The tunnel boring machines would be manufactured probably in Europe. And the kind of people that know how to do those kind of jobs, it's not your basic, you know, union job that is local to here. It's very specialized. So we believe that most of the workers would come in from out of the area. That's something we'll be developing more information around. In terms of the traffic too, I mean, you guys know how dangerous the roads are in the Delta. So we are very concerned about disrupting the communities, you know, in whether it's traffic that's actually directly part of the project that would be contracted for, or this indirect traffic of people working on the site that may be coming from their homes. And the other thing is that we're very concerned about economic losses, whether it's during construction, blocking off entrances to the little towns within the Delta. And then also during harvest, obviously, is a really important time. And you guys see all the tomato trucks and everything on the road right now. It's crazy. You can imagine over the lifetime of the construction period, over 4 million truck trips. I mean, it's kind of unimaginable, but that's how many trucks of material would need to be moving around over a 13-year period. And then in terms of the historic communities, I'm sure you guys are familiar with some of those that are right under near the footprint, and a lot of agricultural land. And that's something kind of, I was just talking to Misty about. We would have thought that with a smaller scale project, somehow the ag impact would be less. but it's not really. It's almost 4,000 acres when you count the mitigation land they would have to put in place to mitigate for the wetlands and other type of resources that would be converted. And then about 2,000 acres of just straight up conversion of farmland to turn it into this industrial wasteland. So, you know, I mean, the Delta is the largest swath of prime farmland in the state. I mean, it's really unique in that it's really not threatened with development directly. And so that's something that's really special about this area. Everywhere else in California you look, there's not much protecting it in the long run, but because of the planning of the legislature around the Delta primary zone and the secondary zone, you know, we can't have that kind of big development in the Delta that would take away our farmland. But of course, all that farming, it operates on economies of scale. We have to have enough pears or enough of the truck crops or enough of anything to be able to contract, to make those contracts, to send out those products. So we're very concerned about chipping away at those economies of scale by losing the farmland. And in terms of the ag and municipal water quality, like was stated, you know, it would give the export water interests higher quality water out of the Sacramento River, much better quality than what they're getting out of the South Delta right now, which is very influenced by the San Joaquin River flows, which is ironically the outflow from the South San Joaquin and some of the same folks that are operating on the exports of water from the Delta in the Central Valley project portion of the project. So they get away from their own dirty outflow and then pick up clean water on the Sacramento River. And at the same time, like Misty's saying, we're concerned about, you know, North Bay Aqueduct or the other intakes that serve municipal needs here, and those down in Stockton, down in Contra Costa County. You know, it seems like there's all this clamor about, oh, you know, all these export areas need water. Well, the Delta needs its water as well. And of course, farmers don't have the opportunity to try to, you know, do desal on their intakes. You know, that wouldn't work. So we're concerned that it's really a zero-sum game, you know, giving better quality water to some people at a cost to the local, you know, and there's millions of people in the Delta as well, and in the areas surrounding it. If you look at Stockton and some of the cities, and that's another thing that's interesting is a lot of times people will say, oh, well, you know, it's all for Southern California. It's actually our neighbors have signed up for this project, and so that's, you have friends in Zone 7 in Alameda County or in Santa Clara County, Santa Clara Valley Water District. Those districts have set, at least for the planning stage, have opted in to be part of this project. And so I think it's very important that we look especially to our neighbors and say, why would you do this? You know, you need to find other ways to meet your water supply needs, which there are many, many other ways to do it. This is really, we think, you know, an antiquated 18th century type approach where you just go upstream and steal somebody else's water. You know, recreation is a big concern as well. We're talking to a lot of the fishing guides and people like that about like what impact it might have on their business if this main stem of the Sacramento River looks a lot different with these really huge diversions. Has anybody ever been by the Freeport diversion just south of Sacramento? You guys seen that one? It's pretty big, honestly, for those that have seen it. That's 285 CFS. So each intake would be more than 10 times that size. It's where the big tower is in Freeport, where it says farm to fork. I think it used to say City of Trees. For some reason in the night it changed, but both were good, I thought. But anyway, so Freeport is kind of a scale thing to see. Well, locally, East Bay Mud and County of Sacramento operate the Freeport facility. That's considered big. This is like monstrous. And also with fishing, obviously, like I was down at Big Break talking with folks in Contra Costa County last night, and a lot of the people were saying, yeah, we used to have fishing, you know, we had a lot better fishery, you know, when they were younger, and how the X2, where the salinity gradient is, keeps moving, and that affects the availability of fish that is sought after for recreation. Of course, we have a huge bass fishery here and bass tournaments and all that stuff, and that brings in revenue to towns throughout the Delta. So let's see. So talk a little bit about some of the better options. I mean, I think that was when Governor Newsom in his State of the State address in January of 2019. That, yeah, he says, I don't, and so I'm listening to it, right? Because I've been working on this stupid tunnel project since 2008. And he says, I don't favor the twin tunnel project. And I'm like, yes. And then he says, but I do favor one. And so, you know, and so I think a lot of us who are advocating for Delta interests in the Delta counties, were like, okay, you're going to take a fresh look, you know, let's take a fresh look at all the options and all the other ways that we could meet this state's demand for water without sacrificing Delta. And we spent a lot of energy trying to put forth those ideas. And, you know, and of course, he just came back to the same, basically the same project, which it was really frustrating, you know, because I think that a lot of people were willing to talk about ways we could make compromises and do, you know, all share together in the burden of figuring out how to get our state the water it needs. But one of the things that Metropolitan Water District has been working on is the freshwater pathway. And that's been in conjunction with the South Delta Water Agency, Central Delta Water Agency, Department of Water Resources. And what they realized is even though Metropolitan Water District, you know, is still favors a tunnel at this time, that it would take a long, long time to build. It's taking a longer time than they ever thought. And so they better make sure to maintain the freshwater pathway to the existing pumps, which is also called armored corridor sometimes. But the point is, you know, building up those levees, making them fatter, making them more earthquake and flood resistant, and then also having barges with all kinds of material that is ready if there is a compromise in a levee, that they can come in quick and shore it up. So the freshwater pathway has been really successful, and it's been a good example, I think, of Delta interests working together with export water interests to address a real problem. And due to the work on the freshwater pathway, I think even Metropolitan says now that the maximum outage, if there was this big earthquake, that we've never had a levee failure from an earthquake in the Delta before, but, you know, is a concern of the water exporters, that it would be an outage of less than 6 months, which these export water areas, they have their own above ground and below ground storage. And they, you know, for instance, during the drought over the summer, they haven't gotten a lot of exports because there wasn't a lot of water that could be provided through the reservoir system. So, you know, this is a good example of, you know, working with our existing system to create the water supply certainty. I think in addition to the freshwater pathway, there's a lot of potential to upgrade the existing facilities in the South Delta to try to do things to keep the endangered fish out of Georgiana Slough and out of the other sloughs that head that way. There's bubble curtains and all kinds of ways to try to keep the fish from making that left turn into the sloughs. And again, they may not be 100%, but one of the things that I've found over the years that's really frustrating is, as long as these really powerful interests want to see a tunnel, then it makes it so they tie their hands and won't work on other things that could reduce take of fish. And the other thing that we basically proved at the water board the last time around when we were fighting the twin tunnels is that even if they put in the new fish screens, which are better than the system they have in the South Delta, those fish screens will still entrain and impinge fish because it's just so much water being sucked out of the river. And, you know, so, and interestingly, in this version of the tunnel project, protecting fish is not even one of the goals of DWR, which in the last version, I mean, to their credit, I guess they said, yeah, we want to reduce take of fish. That's not even on the list now. So to me, I find that baffling that they wouldn't want to, oh, that's a pun. There's baffling on the one. No, anyway, but so yes, state of the art fish screens, but still they would need the take authority. A lot of fish would get killed in the North Delta just the same. And you also, the other thing is reverse flows. You'll hear that a lot. Oh, we need to get rid of reverse flows. Well, anytime you have diversions that are that big, they're going to reverse the flow of the river. And it's tidal up in Sacramento, in Hood and in Portland. It is very tidal. And have slack tide and reverse tides even depending. So the idea that you can, create this, zero fish kill environment is not correct. So, we think improvements to the existing system are very possible. And I think a lot of interest in the Delta would be happy to work with the exporters on that. Another one that you've probably heard that is kind of a big infrastructure type alternative is Western Delta intake concept, which Dr. Pike had worked on for years, and was the idea of creating a reservoir on Sherman Island and then having the tunnel go from there. And the cool thing about whether it was that particular idea or something like it is that perhaps if the state would take the water from farther in the west on land that is owned by the state already, not land that's owned in private, then it would only be good water when the flows are very high. And that has the benefit of being self-regulated. Because the other thing, I don't know if you guys have heard this in the kind of the PR that's going on around the tunnel, is that, oh, it's a big gold project. It's for when there's big storms, we will take the water. But the way the operating criteria would work that they've presented in the EIR is that it would be a bypass flow of only 5,000 CFS or 7,000 CFS, which, I mean, that's a lot of water, but not for the Sacramento River. Like today, I bet the Sacramento River up there is flowing at probably at least like 9,000 CFS. I didn't look, but in drought conditions, we never see the river that low of flow. And if it is that low of flow, you can bet that there's a wedge of salt water coming up the river. So I think that the idea that it's a big gold project is not correct. That's not the operating criteria that have been put forth. What they're saying is they'll take water all year long, including when there's high flows. So, I guess, maybe they could change and have a proposal that they would only take during high flow. But I guess here's the other thing that I worry about is whatever they say the initial operating criteria is, I worry about what are they going to try to get later? Because the other issue, which you may have heard, is that during these drought years, like right now, there's a temporary urgency change petition in place that allows DWR to let the water quality become much more salty than the state law requires, than the water quality control plan says. And so the EIR doesn't really address that. It acts like, oh, they won't be asking for waivers from the water board in the future, which we know, obviously, in this year, last year, 2015. I mean, we've had a lot of really dry years, and we may be looking at more years like that than not. So that's the other thing that, people will say, well, you should trust us. We're like, why would we trust you? I mean, right now, the Delta is not in great shape. Our fisheries are suffering. Our water quality is not great. We've got the hyacinth and the weeds. We've got harmful algal blooms. I mean, we're really struggling, and we all need to get together and figure out how to improve things. But if you would add a tunnel onto that, it does the opposite of improving things, so that's, I guess, and the one other slide we have here is about the National Historic Preservation Act. And that's the Delta counties, which it doesn't include Solano just because you don't have footprint impacts. You don't have historic resources that are directly impacted, although I'm sure there would be an argument for indirect. But the 106 process is something that we're working on to try to protect the legacy communities and the cultural landscapes. And then in addition, it doesn't necessarily prevent the tunnel, but the National Heritage Area designation that Congress did a few years ago, obviously taking out our freshwater from the Delta at the same time as we're saying, hey, we're the only National Heritage Area in the whole state that's been designated by Congress. And there's a lot of excitement and interest around kind of creating more of a visitor experience and drawing in people. I mean, we already get visitors from all over the world to the Delta because it is so special. It's only one of 2 inverted deltas in the whole world. It's very unique and cool and has so many different, values to it. So I think that, that's something that if we're looking toward a future where we are able to accommodate more visitors and create, better boating access and things that hopefully would also be compatible with the farming, because of course we don't want people fooling around up on the levees and getting hurt and all that and trespassing. Um, but you know, that's not compatible if we would take the fresh water out. So, we've got the timeline here and we did just get an extension. So we've, there's a draft DIR comment period. And that's, you know, Misty and me and other people and our consultants are looking at this and trying to come up with comments. But one of the reasons why we wanted to come visit you is to really encourage people to get involved and write your own maybe short letter or to sign on to a group letter, just to be part of the record that you're somebody who wants to protect the Delta and that taking the fresh water out of it in this manner is not the way to do it. So, and the other thing to know though, is that the record will be open for a long time. So if for some reason you didn't get your letter in by December 16th, that's okay. You know, it will take the state. I mean, we want to try to get the state to give up on this and walk away from it. That's frankly our goal. But if they don't, they have all kinds of other permits they need, both state and federal permits. You've heard that California is a permitting nightmare. This may be a good example of why that is helpful. So there's many processes out there, probably besides the CEQA EIR comment period. The other big thing locally that we did a lot of work on last time was at the water board, because they need a change in water right to take the water out up at Sacramento rather than, or in addition to down in the South Delta. So that's another opportunity for the public to participate and tell their own stories. And the thing about that is it doesn't need, I mean, you know, Misty and me and the experts, you know, we're going to make the legal arguments and the technical arguments, but I think what people need to hear about is just regular people. Why is it that you wouldn't want this for your community? Because nobody should be made to feel bad that they don't want this monstrosity in their community ruining their water quality. You know, we can help Southern California get the water they need without sacrificing the Delta. I think we could take questions, or I don't know.
Great, thank you. Are you gonna?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, are you gonna have Mitch talk now, or do you want to do?
You know, I just wanted to reiterate then, just.
Okay, hang on, Lynn. I'll call with public comment. Hang on for a second, please. Okay.
No, it's. So what OSHA was explaining was how big this project is, and also just how much of a monstrosity, just reviewing the data, downloading and reviewing the data. So she said, this is just one part of the booklet. Well, essentially the page count is larger than War and Peace page count alone. That's just what you can download, not to mention all the surveys and all the other documentation that we'd have to download just to be able to make a tactful argument on some of the technical details. So this is a massive project. It's going to be impactful for many years and then impactful longer if it gets operational. So.
Okay. So, okay. Lynn, why don't you make your comment, then I'm going to have our county supervisor come on up and talk
okay.
as well.
I just comment, I lived in Contra Costa County during the last drought, and we were drinking salt water because the Delta got too low with the perfect canals going on. But most importantly, I don't know whether people are hollering at global warming at you or not, but I got a memo, supposedly from NASA, I've never verified it yet, that back in 1958, when I guess the Earth shifted on its axis and they knew that they kept quiet because they didn't want to, all the activist group were getting catalytic converters and all that stuff in cars and trying to make things better still. So they kept their mouths shut until now, when things are getting out of control and the rules are starting to get bad. They finally said that it's not the SUVs or the fossil fuels. The Earth has shifted on its axis. I can see it in my living room. The sun comes in differently now than it used to. I could see that myself. So that's why I believe it's possible, but I'd like a verification. But the sun is strictly too close to the Earth now, and that's what's causing our heat. Nothing more, not fossil fuels, not anything else to blame. I would sure like to have that verified. NASA claimed in that note that I got that it was not from them. I got it from a friend that lived in San Ramon. So I mean, it's Contra Costa County, so it's not verified. That's why I'd like to get it verified. That's really what NASA said. But they've known it since 1958. They just kept their mouth shut because what's wrong with trying to make things even better? So they just kept their mouth shut until things got out of control. They started making rules that were driving the electric cars and all that stuff. And this is what you got to drive, and we'll tell you when to do this and we'll tell you when to do that. and that they finally spoke up. I'd like to, somebody, the city of Rio Vista or you people or what, verify that NASA really did say that and that's what it is. I would love to know.
Okay, great.
We're really
Thanks,
focused
Lynn.
on the tunnel tonight.
Huh?
Yeah, we're talking about the Delta tunnel.
Well, I'm not
tonight.
sure whether the activists would try to say global warming has something to do with it too, you know?
Yep.
You want
Okay,
to take
Lynn.
care of that. You want to take care of it. So that's why I
Right.
mentioned it.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to hold off the rest of the public comment, and I'm going to have our county supervisor come on up and say a few words as well. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, is it all right if I speak from right over here by OSHA so I
Wherever
can
you
see
want.
everybody in
Yep.
the room? I don't
Yep,
want to be
sure.
disrespectful to you, but I want to be able to have everybody speak. I'm loud enough. I really don't even need the mic.
You don't.
Just in case. Okay. I got Mashburn. I'm supervisor here in the 5th district in Solano County. I'm also a 4th generation resident of this county. My family's been involved in agriculture in Suisun Valley and in for all my put togethers. And I see there's some generational farmers in this room and ag folks in this room, as well as residents of Rio Vista who lived in this area in this Delta for many, many, many years. So thank you for caring and for coming out tonight. Taking time out of your night to be part of this because it really does matter. The Delta is a people, the Delta is a place, the Delta is a history, and the Delta has a future. And this proposal that is coming out of the state right now, this reiteration of the same thing as you heard from our staff, it's going to kill that. It's gonna destroy that for us. And we need to stand up as a group and make sure we're heard and make sure they know that we know what they're doing. Okay. I want to be respectful of your time. I don't want to have a big speech that I give when I do the water stuff, but our experts already told you basically what's going on with the tunnel. But just to give you a perspective, this room here, if I paste it off, it'd probably be about 45 foot across. So almost the same size as the tunnel, but 20 feet taller. So just imagine taller than this. That's how big. It's not one new drop of water. $1 billion, and we can do it in 4 years. Right? Sacramento's already done the study. So we can assure that 87% of the water that we need in this state is protected, or what we have of our little tiny drip that we got is protected, but we're choosing not to do that. We're going through this process to put in a tunnel, a single point of conveyance that's going to pull that water out. Now, some of the other issues that we have with this tunnel and with the way that the state is moving through this project, you heard us talk about, and this is going to ring true for everybody in this room. You heard OSHA talk about the fact that this is going to generate between 4 and 5 million truck trips over the life of the project, 300,000 truck trips a year. All right, so you saw what happened right out here on Main Street, run through town, when Vacaville put in a fulfillment center and Amazon trucks started coming through, right? Imagine when they start moving 300,000 big rigs a year on I-5, all the traffic that's on I-5 right now, where's it going to go? It's going to be pushed off of that and diverted, and it's going to be coming through the area. And the impacts are incredible. Just the cities. Right, Air Force Base is the key base in our nation if the balloon goes up, if something bad happens. When we shipped everything to, or started shipping everything overseas for the war, when we started shipping stuff to India for COVID, all that stuff, that all went out of Travis. If we have a national security emergency, one of the biggest things that Travis does is move equipment and supplies, and it's all brought in by truck. And it's all shipped out on those C5s. And if they can't get that stuff on that base, national security is threatened. If we have 300,000 extra trucks out here, Travis is going to be impacted, and it's going to affect their mission. Wasn't considered, not even in the EIR, they didn't even talk about it. Like, again, for just a second and say, hey, remember, we're not creating one new drop of water with this project. Reservoir, which everybody in this room, as voters in California approved. I don't know if you voted for it or not, I did, but we all approved that. The Psych Reservoir and 2 other reservoirs, they haven't even started on it yet. That project will take 12 years to finish and 2 years to fill up once it is finished. We have, and those are only going to exacerbate over that period of time. We don't have time for all these machinations and all these fights when we have viable alternatives out there that we can afford, that the state can start on right now, that don't have those significant permitting issues, that help assure our water into the future. This tunnel assures absolutely nothing. Farmland out of production, it will increase salinity. When we talk about sea level rise and the fact that there's going to be a greater level of flow coming in from the bay, a greater level of salinity coming up into the Delta here, and this will ring for some of the farmers in the room. Right now, we have intakes that go down into the Sacramento River and into its tributaries that we draw on in order to irrigate crops in Solano County. If salt water comes up and we have intrusion up here far enough and enough intrusion, how does that change your crop production? Are you going to be able to grow tomatoes and salt? Alfalfa with salt water? You can. And so it's going to absolutely affect our local production. Economic driver for our county, directly affected because of the water that they're taking out of that river. Not only them though, do pull that water out, and when that water does intrude through the aqueducts into our subbasins, right? Because when the farmers take it out and put it in the soil, it soaks through and it goes into our subbasins. Then that raises the salinity level in the water you drink in your well. That raises the water salinity level in the water that the city of Rio Vista pulls out of the ground to pump to the houses in the city. It changes how you have to treat that water so that it's drinkable. These are all impacts that this project has that they don't address in that EIR, or that they just say, trust us. These are the same folks that said, trust us, we're going to take money from the lottery and fix the schools. We're going to take money from the gas tax and we're going to fix the roads. Yeah, I got a lot of trust left. Not, right? So it's only going to take 13% of the water, and the capacity of that tunnel you're only going to use to 15% of its capacity. Then why are we spending that money and putting in that big a tunnel? Right? don't have a lot of trust there. I would worry that at some point in time, we're going to see a drawdown that's more significant, especially if they're going to do it year round. Actually, I just got back from DC. I've spent a whole week back in DC lobbying this with our federal legislators because folks from the state capitol went a week ahead of us. So I wanted to go behind them and set the record straight. While we were doing that, one of the things that was significant and that came to light was that, see, how do I? Going through on the download. This project only has 3 hearings for the public to make a statement about it. 2 of them have already occurred. The next one occurs tomorrow night. All of them are virtual. So DWR said, hey, we're going to have virtual hearings where the public, you don't get to stand up like this face to face and have your say. You get to call in on Zoom and have 3 minutes to state whatever it is you feel is wrong with the project. And they move on to the next person. They're doing this in an area where one of the community benefits that they're trying to push out with it, when they do a project like this, they come to communities like Rio Vista and say, hey, we know we're going to impact you. So we're going to give you some community benefit. We're going to give you some money and some stuff for some infrastructure or whatever. Biggest community benefits that they're pushing out into the Delta is broadband. So you're going to have hearings on the internet for an area that you are going to give us money for because it doesn't have good broadband. And you want the folks that live there to be able to testify. It's just wrongheaded and it's not right. And they're trying to push that through and they're trying to do it on the down low. And we need to make sure our voices are heard. Now, one of the good things that came out, I can't say it was just because we went to DC, but one of the good things that has come out of the DCC and other folks asking is that the period for us to have a impact and make a statement has been extended until December now, but they haven't given us any more hearings. So tomorrow is your last chance to have a say. If you want to have a say, you have to do it tomorrow. If you want to put it in writing, if you want to write a letter, if you want to have, if your city council has decided saying, hey, we're not, want you to do this, they have time to be able to sign on to that. We have form letters for that that we can get for folks if need be, if you want that. We gave one to the city of Suisun that is putting out one. Have to make sure that our voices are heard because all of this is going to kill all of this, everything that we have. And if everybody says, well, yeah, how do you know? You know, lived here a long time. I can tell you, and there's probably many of you in this room who've driven down Highway 37, right? Vallejo. And you can see what salt water does to a marsh in a delta. Anywhere out there along 37, you look and as far as you can see, it's all little red plants about ankle high, right? And the other side is salt marsh, where there's just a couple of birds and no fish. That's what saltwater intrusion does. That's what I don't want to see happen in our delta here. I don't want to see it impact our farms. I don't want to see it impact our families. I don't want to see it impact generations of history that we have here and destroy that. I want us to all be able to work together for a better conveyance, not a singular conveyance, and to be able to create more water in California, whether that's through reservoirs, recycling water, better storage, whatever the case might be. There are a lot of alternatives and we should be taking advantage of them. We came tonight because we want y'all to go into this fight with your guns loaded, right? When you call up tomorrow night, I want you to have some fact. I want you to be able to just put it out there for them. Hey, this is what's wrong with it. And this is why. That's because the mayor asked us to be here and said, hey, I saw that presentation. That was great. You need to make sure everybody in Rio Vista knows how to do this too. So I'm appreciative, Mr. Mayor. I'm appreciative, council, that you had us out tonight. Contact my office. I'm gonna just leave a whole boatload of cards out here. It's got our number on it. You can call us if you need any information from Misty or OSHA, or if you decide you want to write a letter and you want anything or need anything. If you have any ideas, please call us and share, because we only have till December at this level of the project, this piece of the project, to fight this. And need some help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Misty. Thank you, Osha. Okay, at this time, I'd like to open up for public comment on tonight's topic. So anybody here, you'll have first crack. So anybody here would like to step up and say anything? Just raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Yeah, go ahead, Al. When we finish here, we'll go on online.
I'm Al Medvitz. I'm best known as Jeannie McCormick's husband. And we're ranchers out in the Montezuma Hills. It is gratifying to hear the arguments that we've been making for 30 years now about this. A couple things that I would add. When we talk about the aggie, the loss of ag land, I think we can translate that specifically into the economic impact on Rio Vista and the other cities in the region, including places like Woodland, where farmers go for farm equipment, and Dixon. It's very regional, the impact of the loss of agriculture. And you can see it on Main Street with Doak Tractor, or not on Main Street, but on Front Street with Doak Tractor, with Able Chevrolet. The pickup truck business is an important part of their economy. The repair services that are high-paying jobs, unlike a restaurant. We have high-paying jobs here that are dependent on the agriculture. So if that declines, that is going to have a big impact here, and that impact has a multiplier, so it will impact the restaurants and everything else that goes on in town. So I think that translation, very specific terms, can be done. And, we can, I called Dan Sumner at the Ag Issues Center at UC Davis. They might be able to help with that. The other thing I'm gratified to hear, OSHA, that this is not a 21st century idea. I just say it might be a nice reference to put in your comments that the idea of exporting water from the north to the south was first published in 1870s in a Army Corps of Engineer report. It was written by a guy named B.S. of all things, B.S. Alexander, who was the first commander of the Army Corps here. And he was commissioned by President Grant to do a study about irrigation in California. And he traveled throughout the state and ended up writing in a report in 1873, something like that, I forget the exact date, that it would be really, the future should be to build major transportation or major aqueducts to take water from the north and take it to the south. This is a 19th century concept. When we had unrestrained growth, that we had manifest destiny, we had total domination of nature, and it was going to last forever. And it's no longer appropriate for the 21st century. And I think some literature sites for that would be really good. Finally, I think another issue is population growth. I published a thing and share it with you about population growth, and it's still valid. Back in 1990, about that the growth of California and the change in the demographics is ongoing. Our population growth in California is about the same as Mexico and other developing countries, even when it's low in historic terms. Some of the counties are faster than any developing country. That growth is projected to continue. By the end of this century, it's very likely we will have 100 million people in the state, roughly twice of what we've got now, certainly at least 80 million. Imagine then having to provide water that is in limited supply to that population. That needs to be dealt with in this. This project was established I think it went online in 1960. The State Water Project. It's been 60 years, and now it doesn't work anymore. It's not going to work in the future. And so, one last thing, I could take, I'm a former professor, so I could.
Yes,
take all your time.
we have a limited time, so
yeah.
you need to.
But I would like to say about the issue of the earth tilt, that from my point of view is a misinterpretation.
Could you speak into the microphone now,
Yeah,
please?
is a misinterpretation of some early science. I'm a former academic. I taught physical sciences at Boston University. I'm a fellow of the American Association of Advancement Science. For anybody who needs to fact check their climate change data or information, I'd be happy to help. I won't just confront you, but I will help you check the sources and check the validity. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Al.
So happy to do that.
Okay. Anybody else here wishing to speak? Yes, please. Okay, I'm not sure how much public comment we're going to have tonight, so I'm going to ask you to kind of keep it to under 5 minutes, please.
Definitely.
Okay.
I'm Margaret Anderson, better known as Jeannie McCormick's good friend. And I just need a clarification. There's no way I'm going to read through the 4 binders of the EIR. I can barely get reading through my to-do list every day. But is there any emphasis on water conservation measures? Mitch talks about no new drops of water, but really what we need to do societally is more than just as individuals, municipally or as a state. We need to change how we use water. And I'm wondering if they address that in this EIR.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And part of the comments we're developing go to the what's called the alternatives analysis in the EIR. And that's one of the things that we will be commenting on, is that really the EIR just includes a bunch of different types of tunnels in different locations, but it never looks at, as you're mentioning, Margaret, could demand be reduced such that there wouldn't be a need for a tunnel. And and when you're looking at, even with population growth, they used to figure, oh, you need 1 acre foot of water for one household. Now it's like half an acre foot or even less for the newer development. So I mean, you can do a lot more with less in the urban areas in particular. In agriculture, obviously, there are ways to save water. It's a little harder in the Delta than some other locations because of our unique hydrology. But yeah, that is one of the shortcomings of the EIR, is that it doesn't look at how do you reduce demand, and also how do you develop more regional self-sufficiency. Like the Pacific Institute, for instance, had a study a couple months ago that showed, yeah, they could get 200 million acre feet of water if they would capture their stormwater in certain cities in Southern California. So that's water that really is not doing a lot of good for the environment right now, but that could be made available. So that's absolutely part of what we will be commenting on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Arsha. Anybody else here? Yes, please come on up.
Mayor, may I interrupt for a minute?
Uh-huh.
There are virtual chats who are asking they would love to write a letter about this topic. So can you kindly give us an address? and
Yeah,
a
we'll
point of
do
contact?
that at the end of the meeting. We'll give that out. Okay.
Hello, my name is Jeannie McCormick and I'm that professor's wife. But I just wanted to tell Misty and OSHA that I think it must have been the summer of 2016. When was the last sort of rushing? Right. I remember sweating in the basement of the Ride Hotel while we were all figuring out what can we do to stop this process, running us down. And this was the most succinct, truthful thing I have ever seen about the plot that the state has tried to hatch now 3 times. So I just, I would like to help. I don't know how I can help. I can read, I can write letters, I can call people. And is Restore the Delta an organization that we should, that people who want to help should volunteer for?
Yeah, on the last slide, I don't know if this is a handout or not. On the last slide, we didn't actually get to it. We list some of the community groups, including Restore the Delta, that are working to try to respond to and stop the tunnels. So we also have Save the California Delta Alliance listed, as well as the website of the Delta Counties Coalition, which that's where we have a lot of the resources that were referenced in terms of a sample comment letter, a sample resolution that cities and districts. Because I think that's the other thing besides letter writing is, your network, your social network, like getting out the word that we don't care to be a sacrifice zone for an unnecessary and too expensive project. So I don't know if we can.
Yeah,
maybe
what I'm going to suggest is that we will take all this contact information as well as the sample letters. We'll put it on the city's website and you can access it anytime. Okay.
Thank
So,
you.
okay.
Thanks. And
Right, thank you.
so much for this. It's a really uplifting, I have to say.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would also like to mention that on the back of this handout is the Delta Counties Coalition, and there are sample letters and more information that you can find at the Delta Counties. And also I have posted example letters on the county's website. So you can always contact me and then I can show you where to find some of these things.
Great. Anybody else wishing to? Anybody else wishing to make comment? Yes, please.
Two ladies told me something that made me even prouder to be part of the Delta community. I didn't know that this was one of the 2 inverted deltas in the world. And as such, it's not just a local treasure, it's a national treasure and a global treasure. With a deadline coming up and a community like Rio Vista, where there's a large number of retirees who are likely to feel real good about getting involved in a lovely project to volunteer. Most of us go figure out how to do it on our own. If we have the resources, I'm sure with our December 16th deadline, we can organize people. If we have some leadership to know what to do, to have a really good plan of attack of how we'll go about this, I would love to be involved, but I don't have that kind of expertise. I need your help to help us get together what we need to do before our deadline. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. All right, anybody else wishing to comment here?
My name is Brian Sprouting. I'm a resident of Rio Vista, and to echo off what Mr. Mashburn said about Highway 37 is you don't have to travel too far from Rio Vista to see what the effect of salinity in the water does. All we have to do is travel a few miles downriver to Sherman Island, what was a vibrant agriculture area that was affected by salinity in the water, and see how it has affected Sherman Island and the agriculture out there and the economic value that that island used to have. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Anybody else here wishing to comment? Okay, I'm going to open it up to the online comments.
Right now, Mr. Mayor, we do not have any raised hands
No raised hands? Okay.
and there are no inbox.
Okay, great. All right, then one more. Yep. Sure.
Saw the very last slide up there, they talked about a 106 hearing. What a 106 hearing is that the Corps of Engineers has to have a hearing about, remember I said the Delta is a place? Historical designation that we have, a national designation that we have here in the Delta. They have to have a hearing about that. And the Army Corps is one of the permitting agencies that is able, that literally could stop this tunnel. Now, I don't think necessarily that, and Nosha, correct me if I'm wrong, that the 106 process and the hearing for that would have the authority or be able to actually stop the project. But the one thing that it will do, and where you can help and other folks who want to get involved can help, is that one of the things we lobbied for in DC when we went back there, and that Congressman Garamendi was an absolute advocate for, he wrote a letter that 11 other legislators signed on to, was that we want the Corps of Engineers to have their hearings as public hearings, where you get a chance to come up to a mic and have your say, right? Where we have the time that's required to be able to put together a formidable response. And so it looks like when they have those hearings here, it'll probably be sometime in about, I want to say about 6 months-ish. We don't know. They think about 6 months to have before they have those hearings, but we will have time to organize and be able to have a greater level of impact at those hearings and with the federal government and actually have a say versus what we have now with the virtual hearings that are going on. So I just wanted to throw that out there. There will be hearings. They'll be at a federal level, and they're committed to doing those in a public venue so that everybody actually gets to speak.
Yeah, okay, sure. Just a quick one, Al.
Really gone through the current EIR. But what is the biological science in that? I mean, is it different than it was on the for the two tunnels? You know?
I mean, it's basically, we think we have a fisheries expert named Bruce Herbold that's working with the county to look at the fisheries issues. But I mean, so far I've heard that, yeah, it doesn't incorporate the newest science. And then also, like I mentioned, it used to be a project objective to reduce take of fish was one of the supposed purposes of the two tunnel project, which I don't think it would have done that necessarily, but they got rid of that goal. So they're not even saying they want to do better for fish, which is, you know, unfortunate. So, yeah.
Okay, the reason I bring that up is because for the two tunnel project, the National Academy of Sciences scathingly reprimanded the EIR for the really bad science on the biology, particularly because excuse me for that.
You okay?
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, we're hoping they will review it again. I think that's something that we
Yeah.
need to check into. Thank you for bringing that up.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, thanks, Al.
I will mention also, if folks are into, you know, on their social media, you know, if you're into Facebook and things like that, I was showing Misty, there is like Stop the Delta Tunnel, there's North Delta Cares, there's Delta News, Bill Wells has the Delta Rats. I mean, so there's a lot of social media and Twitter pages that are kind of centered around protecting the Delta. And that's I mean, I know it's kind of some people don't think it's that important, but it's a way to get the word out and to speak your mind and to connect with other people.
Well, will your sample letters also show who they should be directed to, agencies, names,
Yeah,
addresses and
we
that?
can
Okay.
link so you can put it on
Alright.
the city website, but yeah, it's got I mean, we have the email address for DWR, but I mean, I think that's the other thing to get the word out farther. You know, if you would like to copy your local legislator at the state or federal level with your comments, I think that helps elevate the awareness about how this is an important issue for local people.
Great, thank you. All right, well, Mitch, this is the last chance. You done? Yes.
If everybody's gonna. So all of our
Thank you. All right. I'm sorry. If you're going to speak, you need to come up. Okay. All right.
Any value in this project above what the value to the contractor who gets the government contract for it? It doesn't sound like anything useful to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm closing off public comment and both here and online. And really want to thank OSHA. I want to thank Misty. I want to thank Mitch for showing up tonight and really giving a great presentation. It's very informative. And I really want to encourage all of you to look at the list of contacts, you know, do the letters, show support for leading this project down. So city will support it as well. So thank you all for coming tonight. Meeting's adjourned.